you know what? If I can find somebody that can do it 80% as good as me, I'm going to delegate it, because 80% done by somebody else is 100% awesome for me. Because now I buy my time back, and now I can focus on other more high-level activities to drive the business forward.
Welcome back to ChiroX, where we talk business growth for, well, chiropractors. That right there is the golden rule of scaling, but man, it is hard to do. If you are a high-performing chiropractor, you probably built your practice on your own back. You're the visionary, the operator, and the best doctor in the room. But that superpower is the exact reason you're still stuck in the daily grind. Today, we are gonna fix that. I got a chance to sit down with Dr. Eric DiMartino. He is a multi-clinic owner, a coach at the Remarkable Practice, and a self-proclaimed weirdo because he actually likes the business side of things more than the patient care side of things. In this episode, we break down his Rubik's Cube framework, which helps you figure out the 6 sides of your practice that you need to solve in order to go from control freak to CEO. We talk about why 70% of chiropractors are actually in the wrong role in their business, how to hire A players that actually care as much as you do, and the exact steps to literally fire yourself from operations so you can scale your practice. If you're ready to turn your job into a business, then this episode's for you. Let's dive in. Sweet, we are live. And if you're a chiropractic business owner and you feel like you are the bottleneck of your practice, or you just feel stuck in the day-to-day grind to trying to break free, this conversation's for you. So today we are talking about how to go from control freak to CEO and literally fire yourself from operations so that you can scale. Today, I'm bringing on Dr. Eric DiMartino, I believe, if I'm saying it correctly. Nailed it. He owns multiple clinics. He's a coach of the Remarkable Practice, and he has successfully navigated this journey from Dr. Eric and now to CEO. And welcome to the show. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. Great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for doing this. I want to dive straight into this and right into the deep end. You told me that 70% of chiropractors are actually in the wrong role. You also admitted that early on you were a total weirdo because you love the business side more than the treatment patient side, which I definitely makes me a weirdo. But let's dive into that. Like, why do you think that there's just this confusion about what a chiropractor should be doing in their business?
Well, I think all chiropractors should be operating in their zone of genius. And so it's not necessarily that 70% of chiropractors are in the wrong role, but many of them are. And so we do lots of different what we call cognitive testing, which is a type of testing that helps us identify, like, what should you be doing? Like, what are you really designed to do? And what that shows us is that 70 to 80% of chiropractors are not designed to be business owners. They're not. They're what we call caregivers. They're designed to be amazing doctors who deliver great care. Because if you really look at it, the skill sets that make a great business owner usually do not make a great doctor. Now, you definitely can have those unicorns out there that are just can do all, but we find that about 20 to 30% of chiropractors are designed to be entrepreneurs, whereas the other 70 to 80% are designed to be those great caregiver docs that just are amazing with patients. And so, like you said, I was a weirdo. But what I found was, I'd be at conferences talking to other chiropractors, and they would always be talking about how it's like, man, I just, I got this business stuff I got to do, but I just can't wait to get back into the room with the patients and taking care of them. And I just love all my patients. I love taking care of them. And here I was, kind of the opposite. Like, I loved my patients, but it was like a lot of times I'm with taking care of my patients, and I'm like, man, I can't wait to get back in my business office and work on the next marketing campaign or the next whatever business venture. And I was like, there's something wrong with me. I'm just this weirdo. Like, all these guys just talk about how much they love being with their patients. And I kind of felt the opposite. And then fortunately, I started to learn about different types of testing and understanding that, people are wired differently. And once I did my testing, I'm a hardcore entrepreneur, and I'm just wired that way. So I love the business side. And it wasn't that I didn't love my patients. It just didn't energize me as much. And so I think the key for all chiropractors out there is to really understand, what are you wired for? We all have strengths and weaknesses, and it's not a good or bad thing. It's just, what are you wired to do? And ideally, put yourself in that position, because that's where you're going to be happiest. You're going to be most productive. I talk to a lot of chiropractors, and they're like, I can tell they're caregiver docs, but they own a business, because that's what people think you're supposed to do as a chiropractor. And they keep talking about how, oh, I hate running the business. I hate doing this. I hate dealing with staff. I hate hiring. I hate firing, like all that stuff. It doesn't mean they can't do it. They can be a business owner, but it's like the necessary evil they have to deal with. It's like, I just want to be with patients. So as a result, usually they end up staying small because they don't want to grow a team, because they don't want to manage a team. And they just kind of own a job, right? They just have to put everything on their shoulders. And the business side is something they have to do, but they don't really enjoy it. And so what we teach people is understand what you're wired to do. Like figure out that, and even if you're a caregiver doc and you're like, man, I still kind of want to be a business owner. I just don't want to deal with the business side. Great. I have clients that are like that. So what we do is we say, okay, you're going to be the caregiver doc. You're going to be the owner too, but we're going to find you an unbelievable operator that can run your team and run your business for you. Right. So you can still be the CEO if you want, but you need a COO who's going to run the business for you, manage the team, hire, fire, do all that. So you can be the owner, but then be with patients, which is really where you shine. So it's really getting clear on exactly what you're designed to do and then operating in that mold so you'll be happier. That's what it's really about.
You gave some of the telltale signs of somebody that's more of a caregiver doc. What are some of the telltale signs of a hardcore entrepreneur?
Yeah. So the one of the big differences was a couple. One is your level of dominance. And that's one of our tests really brings that out. Like if you're a higher dominant person, you're more wired to be an entrepreneur. Whereas more caregivers are more
Define
lower.
dominance. What do you mean by
So
that?
dominance is if you're in a group of other people, are you going to be the one that just takes control and just becomes a natural leader,
Got it.
right? Versus other people will kind of stay more in the background. So that's a dominance thing. The other thing is risk appetite. Entrepreneurs have a very high appetite for risk. They're willing to take chances. It's kind of what you got to do in the entrepreneurial world. Whereas the caregivers are much more risk averse. They're more safe. They don't like insecurity, and so that's one of the big things that we see in caregiver docs as well.
So would it be safe to say then that the same doctor that is also a hardcore entrepreneur is also kind of has a control freak mentality, or do those seem to pair together?
Oh, 100%. And that was something that I was guilty of. They typically, most of them will have that initially, but to be successful, they have to overcome that without a doubt.
So what do they do then? Or like what did you do? So what was like the epiphany moment for you, or what could somebody else recognize in themselves to allow them to overcome this mentality?
Yeah, so this was a big challenge for me because really probably the first decade of my career, it was the Dr. Eric show. It was like I would do everything. I'm like, hey, I'll work 80 hours a week. I don't care. Right. It's like throw that on my back. And one of the double-edged swords about entrepreneurs is that we tend to be good at a lot of different things. Right. It's kind of required when you first start a business and you may be the only team member, you got to be able to do a bunch of different things. But the double-edged sword of that is that we find it very hard to delegate because we may be good at a lot of different things. And so it's like, well, if I hired a team member, if they can't do it as good as me, then I'm like, well, I'm not going to give it to them. I'm just going to keep owning it. And we just keep throwing more and more stuff on our back until eventually we become the bottleneck. And then we either burn out, we crash, we don't see our kids' school or, sporting events. And it's just like we're this absentee person because we're just dedicated to the business. And as entrepreneurs, sometimes we get juiced by that, right? It's dangerous. But it obviously doesn't lead to a good family life or a good social life long term. And I see docs all the time. They'll do that for 5 or 10 years, and eventually they either burn out or, like me, they're fortunate enough to have the right mentors in their life to help them overcome that. And so for me specifically, what I realize is that, you know what, if I can find somebody that can do it 80% as good as me, I'm going to delegate it because 80% done by somebody else is 100% awesome for me because now I buy my time back and now I can focus on other more high level activities to drive the business forward. And once I realized that, I'm like, okay, you know what? I can find people that can actually do the things that I don't want to do. And I'll tell you, one of the big pivot points for me was this is probably about 15 years ago now. I took an assessment called Strengths Finders. I'm sure some of our listeners have heard of it. But basically, what that test does is it analyzes your strengths and weaknesses, right? It basically says that as human beings, we all have these 34 talents, they call it. And when you take the test, it ranks in order from number 1 to number 34. And so obviously the lower on the list, it's a weakness of ours. The higher in the list, it's a strength. And when I took that test, I realized that I was very high in things that business owners are high in. Right, I was very high in I was competitive. I was high in analytical. I was an achiever, like all these things that most entrepreneurs have. But I was very low in things that make a good doctor, things like empathy, things like connectedness, right? Those types of things that are important for a doctor. I was very low in those. So I could do it because I was kind of faking it, but it wasn't really who I was. But what really was a pivot point for me is they said something I'd never heard before. And what they said is that all human beings have strengths and weaknesses. We all do. The key is to only work on our strengths and not work on our weaknesses. And that was something different I'd ever heard before. Because you go back to like high school, if you were like me, you got like, A's in math and science, and then I would get like C's in like English and social studies, history, stuff I wasn't interested in. Now, my teachers in high school, they wouldn't say, you know what, Eric, You're clearly better at math and science. So let's just focus on that. Don't even worry about the English and history. Don't even worry about that. They wouldn't do that. What would they say? We got to focus on those English and history grades. We got to bring those up. Well, in the real world, it's the exact opposite. And what Strength Finder said is you should only work on your strengths because that's what you're good at. You're going to be happier as a result of that. You're obviously being more productive because it's exactly what you're designed to do. But then we can't just ignore our weaknesses. We have to hire people who their strengths are my weaknesses. We complement each other. And so now you have everybody working in their strengths. Everything's being accomplished in the business, and the business just thrives from there. And so one of the big mistakes I see a lot of docs make is they hire people like themselves because we like ourselves. So it's like, I want to hire another Dr. Eric. The problem is when now you have two Dr. Erics, you have a whole bunch of these strengths being covered and all these weaknesses being ignored. So we want to hire strategically to specifically determine what are my strengths and my weaknesses. And when I hire somebody, I want to hire somebody that their strengths are my weaknesses. So now all the bases are covered. And that's just hiring 101, but it's something we're not really taught in school.
No, not at all. And it's something that I struggled with for a long time is that I honestly barely passed school, like K through 12. I graduated with what would have been like a 1.8 or something like that, which I think is like a D minus or something. And for the longest time, man, I held on to this identity of I was like dumb and like I would never achieve and I just like I would never do anything with my life. And in reality, when you really look at like the structure of the school system, not that this conversation is about like what we should or shouldn't be doing with education, but it's built on the model of like creating generalists, which unfortunately that's no longer the world that we live in. At some point we probably did, but that was many, many, many years ago. And so I think you nailed it. And it's funny too, because I think many people probably listening to this have probably taken some form of a personality test. I mean, I've taken them all, man, like Myers-Briggs and Nanogram and Strength Finder and I don't know, Working Geniuses is one I did recently. But and they're helpful, but only if you actually like apply what your strengths and weaknesses are. Because I think what most people do is they take them and they're like, oh, that's cool, cool, cool. Like that's some cool information. I learned a little bit about myself. But then did you actually like lean into what you're strong and bad at? Probably not, I would say for most people.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, and in the chiropractic world, you see it show up all the time because not only are we small businesses, so we're dependent on less people, but specifically going back to the who should be an owner and who should be an associate doc, is that chiropractic is still one of the few healthcare professions where the majority of chiropractors own their business, right? You look at like MDs, 90% of MDs do not own their business, right? And you see it shifting in dentistry now, where it's like most dentists, because honestly, what makes great doctors does not make a great entrepreneur typically. And so we need to start to, get with the program in chiropractic and realize that we should be operating in our roles. And I think one of the challenges there is that, there's this unfortunate stigma that if you're not the owner of a chiropractic business, that you're somehow lesser. You're not as good as being the owner. So it's almost like a status thing. But the example I always use is, we don't think of the neurosurgeon, we don't think less of that person because they don't own the hospital. It's like, yeah, they work in the hospital. They're a neurosurgeon. They do amazing things for people, right? So it should be no different. And so we kind of get over that stigma in chiropractic and let docs be in their zone of genius so we can all be happier and more productive as a result.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say too, which is why I like the original statistic of like 70% of people aren't hardwired for that. Of like,
Mhm.
I think there's just a global stigma of we glorify entrepreneurs
Mhm.
in so many ways, which is like the risk taker and they bet it all and they like sacrifice their health and their family to achieve this thing, and we glamorize it, and then sadly we probably shouldn't be,
Yeah.
realistically.
Well, for every one of those entrepreneurial success stories you hear, there's 10 failures that you never hear about, right? That's
Yeah,
just the
the
reality of it.
what do they call that? Winner's bias or something like that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
let's talk about the Rubik's Cube.
Mhm.
This is a model that I got and I know you guys use, and hopefully this version is much less complex than an actual Rubik's Cube because I've never actually solved those in my entire life. But why that specific metaphor, and what is it about? Do you have to solve it in a certain order, like in a Rubik's Cube? Like break this down for us.
Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, so there's six sides to the Rubik's Cube. And what the Rubik's Cube means is you have to solve these six sides in order to turn your job into a business. See, a lot of chiropractors out there that are business owners, they think they own a business, but they really just own a job, right? A job they may love, but it's not really a business. And so solving these six sides is what turns your job into a business. And so the six sides, it's vision, leadership, systems, people, training, and energy. Right? Those are the six things we have to solve. Now, the reason we love the Rubik's Cube metaphor is that, you know, I'm the same way, Corey. I've never solved the Rubik's Cube. My teenage daughter like figured out how to do it in like 5 minutes. I think it was, on TikTok, she gets on there and she's very analytical. And so she figured it out. I could always get one side, right? And so it's like, all right, I got this one side. Then I would try to solve another side, but then I'd screw the first side up. Right. And so that's kind of what happens. A lot of times we'll solve one side and we try to fix another side, and then the first side is now screwed up. And so the key is we have to solve all six sides. And the challenge here is that it's very dynamic. You might solve the people side, but then 6 months later that falls apart. Your team disintegrates, right? And we think we got the systems thing down, and then that fails, right? So it's like it's this evolving thing that we're constantly working on, making sure we solve all six sides and then keep them solved, and obviously course correct over time as things come up. And so if you don't have these six sides solved, I promise you own a job. And our goal with our clients is to help them, especially our CEO clients, is to help them. How do I turn this into a true business? And there's really three ways that we define a business, whether you own a job or a business. Number one is it's scalable, right? Scalability. Because if you are like, for me, I was the Dr. Eric show. That I'm not scalable. There's only so many hours and days in the week that I can actually work. So I could do well, but I'm going to hit a block where I can no longer scale. And so once you have a business, now you have scalability, because we are, as the owner, are no longer the bottleneck, right? We can use things like systems and all these different things, and hire great team members to help us grow the business. And it's not all dependent on us. So first one's scalability. The next one's durability. And what durability means is I could be out of the office and the office still operates and can even grow in my absence, right? A lot of docs out there, they may have like associates, and they could take a month off and the business will still operate, but they'll come back and it will have shrunk 20 or 30%, right? That's not durable. Durable means I could take a month off, come back, and we actually grew 5% in my absence, right? And so that's, if we have durability, we know we have a true business. And the third one is transferability. And what that means is that there's value there if I didn't show up, right? Like if you wanted to buy my practice, Corey, and on Friday I finish up and I'm like, here you go, it's your business. When I don't show up on Monday, is there still value there? Is there still value? Now, if the practice is completely dependent on me, there's very little value. We always say that the more valuable you are to your business, the less valuable your business is. So I really work with my CO clients on how can we make you less valuable to the business, right? We want to get to the point where we go to work because we want to, not because we have to, right? Because we have a great team that can operate independently of us, then that's a valuable business. I would want to buy that business because I know that owner is going to leave, but I can come right in and boom, Monday morning, there's value. We're helping people. There's systems in place. There's a great team, and there's a lot of value there. But if it was completely dependent on that doc, when I show up Monday morning, there's nothing left over and there's no value. And unfortunately, in chiropractic, that is a huge issue, because 80% of chiropractic businesses, they don't sell. They just close. 80% don't sell. Wow. They close. Because it's a doc who probably delivered great care for 30 or 40 years to his community, helped a lot of people, but because it was dependent on that person, there's nothing valuable to buy. And so they just shut the doors. So not only does that, that great practice that served many people close, but there was no value captured. There was no, we should be able to exit and get, a 7-figure exit for our business because of all the value we built over those years. But in chiropractic, unfortunately, it's very prevalent that just doesn't happen. So by having your job into a business, not only do you get the short-term benefits of this thing that can throw off profit without you having to do all the work, but there's also the opportunity to have a really graceful, profitable exit where your legacy continues and you get obviously the money as the return on the asset that you've built over the years.
And you can hand it down to family, right? It's like there's a bit of a generational wealth opportunity in that if that's something that piques somebody's interest. And I mean, yeah, like you're setting up future generations of whatever chiropractic Dr. DiMartino family or whatever it is that wants to continue on the legacy, as you said. I'm curious then though, is like what I feel like if I'm thinking about this from the perspective of a doctor that's maybe thinking about exactly what you're talking about of like, okay, I want to create something that I could potentially hand down and like not be so reliant on me and my name. I would be willing to guess that a huge part of this is probably an identity shift issue, because you mentioned that I'm not going to butcher the quote you just exactly said, but basically like we want to feel valuable, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure there's a degree of like having to let go of feeling valuable within the business, which I'm sure is a huge obstacle for doctors. Like, how does one make that shift, or how does somebody transition?
Well, you have to get your ego out of the way. right? You have to let the ego out of the way. For me, it was, yeah, I loved it for the first decade. It was Dr. Eric. People wanted to see me. It made me feel good, right? And I thought, I built this practice on my own. It's like I was able to do this and I'm helping lots of people. I'm making good money. But eventually I was like, I don't want it to be about me anymore because it's a heavy lift. It's on my shoulders. And so I got to the point where I realized that if the less it is about me, the more valuable my business is. And I started bringing associate docs in and I made them the stars, right? Because they are the stars. They're in the practice way more than I am. And so I want them to be the stars of the show. So patients want to see them and they love them and our community knows them, not just me. Because again, I way more important than my ego is having a great business and having the life that I want. And I can't have that if it's all about me and the business. So it's a bit of a maturity, I would say, that we get to eventually, or maybe it's just the pain of not wanting to be, so dependent upon by the business and your patients. But I think it's just a natural progression over time that we evolve, hopefully, to get to that point.
I feel like it's such a like stab in the heart, even for me personally with my own business of like we, especially as owners, we just have such dramatic control issues. It's just like it's so bad. But okay, like let's say they do accept that message. Let's say somebody listening is like, all right, I need to get out of the way. I know a big part of this is you alluded to it a few times is systems and shadowing. I want to talk about specifically shadowing though, because
Mhm.
I literally actually just had this conversation yesterday with my fiance, who has a practice here in Texas, and one of the things that she has done in the past for sure is like, just watch me, just follow me, just shadow me, just do what I do. Let's talk about that for a little bit. What would you say to somebody like that?
Oh man, I have this conversation almost on a daily basis, I think, with clients. Yeah, so this is a challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs because one of the things that makes entrepreneurs who we are is we tend to be pretty charismatic. Not always, but many times we're pretty charismatic. But we also tend to be have natural sales talents that most docs don't have, and we're not even aware of it. And so what happens is if I'm like, I could, and I'm not saying I'm special, it's just what's one of my strengths is that I could walk in a room with a new patient and really not even have a script or system and I can close them, right? I can go in there and I just have this confidence, this conviction, I can just make it happen. And a lot of docs don't have that. So what happens is if I hire someone, say, hey, just do it like me. Well, if they're not me, it's not going to work for them. And so what I really realize, and I work this regularly with my clients, is that they have to understand that we have to set up systems for the team, not for us. Because what works for us will typically not work for other team members. Right? We always like to say, as entrepreneurs, we're the kings of wing. We can just wing it, and usually we can make it work. But associate docs, typically a true caregiver profile can't do that. They need structure. They need exact what do I say? How do I do it? Like they need that kind of structure. Whereas sometimes entrepreneurs hate structure. They want to just wing it, but it's the exact opposite for what will be successful for our team members. So, the example I always use is that if you look at McDonald's, I don't know if you know this, but McDonald's is the number one revenue generating restaurant in the nation. Number one by far. Number two, this was as of a year or two ago, it might have changed, but number two is Starbucks. Number three is Subway. And McDonald's generates more revenue than Starbucks and Subway combined. McDonald's is a beast. Now, same individual store sales, it's actually Chick-fil-A, but McDonald's has so many locations that they just trump everything else. Now, I bring this up because if McDonald's had systems that only worked for the CEO, guess what? McDonald's would fail. But McDonald's, the majority of their employees are teenagers. So here we have the highest revenue generating restaurant in the nation, and the majority of their employees are teenagers. How do they do that? They have systems built for teenagers, right? My son used to work for Taco Bell. He's 20 now. He was 18 then, and I got to see what they actually did. It is literally a no-brain job. Like a monkey could do it. That's how they set it up. And they have a train system where it's like anybody could do it, and that's smart because that way they can hire teenagers for minimum wage and still generate great results. That again, a CEO doesn't have to be the one operating the systems. If your systems require you to operate them, again, you own a job, you don't own a business. So we have to have systems for the team that are structured. They can see it. We can train them on it, and so we can help them be successful. But it's got to be built for the team. It cannot be built for the owner of the business. Because what we're looking for, and this is what McDonald's has accomplished, is we want to achieve excellence. And sometimes when we hear the word excellence, we think super high achievers. That's not what excellence is. Excellence is not doing extraordinary things. Excellence is doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. When you have systems in place, anybody should be able to execute these systems and be successful. And so that's why we are so focused on systems in the Rockwell practice, because if you don't have them, It's always going to be dependent on you.
Are systems as easy as just like inject and execute? And the reason I ask that question is because, okay, I hear the doctor thinking to themselves of like, yeah, I have some systems or I've built some systems myself.
Mhm.
And I would be curious as to like, how would somebody maybe streamline that? Because let's take you, for example. Let's say you were to open another practice tomorrow.
Mhm.
What would be the fastest way to go from no systems to like optimize systems as quickly as possible? Is there like templates somebody should follow? Do you have to create them all yourself from scratch? Like, what would you do?
No. So I mean, the remarkable practice provides them for people, and obviously, people, doc can tweak them a little bit based on their modalities they offer, their philosophy, whatever that is. But yeah. So I did this when I acquired a second office 5 years ago, and I literally took the systems that we've proven have worked in my main office, and we just dropped them in. It's exact same systems, same kind of chiropractic office. Obviously, you had to hire the team members, or I acquired it, so it was retrain the team members on our systems. But yeah, we give our clients the systems. We have it in place from everything from attraction, conversion, retention. Three parts of the practice. Attraction is how do you get new ones. Conversion is how do you get them to see the value and choose to commit to the recommendations you give. And then retention is building value so they choose to be under chiropractic care long term. So we have systems for the entire process, the entire patient journey. And so we just help our clients understand them and implement them and then train on them.
It probably baffles you how many practices just, like, don't do that, right?
Mhm.
Like, they just continue to grind away or maybe try to figure it out on their own or try to create custom solutions and, like, continue to hold on to the ego and just, like, don't do it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is chiropractic school teaches you be a great chiropractor. It doesn't teach you to run a business.
Yeah.
We just have zero exposure to it, and we're just doing the best we think we can do. And some of it is just some people are just not structured at all. They almost fear structure to some extent. We always say some people think that systems kind of restrict you. It's like it restricts me. It's like no, systems are what set you free. That's what systems do. Because now it's not about you. You can have a team that can actually train on this. And so they just have to see the value. Another part of it is they just don't know how to create it. And if they don't have a coach or somebody that can guide them, they just have never seen it before.
Makes me think so much of E-Myth Revisited. I always think about the story of I think it's like a pie shop or something like that, of like how it's like a pie owner who wants to be the one making the pie and
Mhm.
doing all the sales and running the cash register and the booking and the accounting and blah blah blah. And they don't realize like it's without the system, you will never actually be able to provide high level care or amazing pies. Like you need the system. There's a recipe, right?
That's how you scale.
Yeah. So speaking of team building, you talked about it there a second ago. So when you're looking to hire like A players, associates, CAs, whatever that is, like what's
Mhm.
the number one trait you're looking for when bringing on team members?
That's a great question. So we define an A player with three specific traits. It's talent, skill, and heart. I would say the number one is heart. How much do you care? Right? Because we always say that attitude beats ability every single day of the week. Right? You could have all the talent and skill in the world, but if your heart's not there, it's just not going to work out. And so heart is defined by how much you care. Skills are defined by what can you actually do, which I'm least worried about skills because I can train skills. And then talent is basically how quickly can you pick those skills up, right? Some people are just have more talent for certain things than others. And so that's how we measure if somebody's an A player. Where do they rank from 0 to 10 on talent, skills, and heart? We say that A players have to be nines or tens in talent, skills, and heart. And heart and talent are tough to teach, but it's the skills thing we can teach. And this is where we make a lot of mistakes when it comes to hiring. Because if you think about it, most, not just docs, most people in business in general, when we're interviewing somebody for a position, what are the questions we ask? It's all
They're all
skills based
skills,
questions.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like what
experience,
certificates do you have? What
yeah.
degrees do you have? What work experience do you have? We don't figure out what is their heart. How much do they care? Right? What kind of talents they have? The most important things that we can't teach, we don't ask questions about, and we wonder why. I think Top Grading said that only 25% of people will hire an A player. So only 1 out of 4 hires will actually be an A player. Top Grading is one of the top, team building books in the world, and they said if you follow their systems, you can get up to 75% of your hires will be A players. So even then, it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what the average person does.
What does heart look like, right? Like I think most people could wrap their heads around the other two of like talent, they learn quickly, skills, like you said, the resume or experience, blah blah blah, lame
Mhm.
stuff. But like what does heart look like?
So heart is the way I like to think about it is I have some team members on my team that if you came in and hung out for a week, you would think that they owned the practice. They care that much, right? I hope I don't botch this quote. I heard a great quote a couple months ago. It said the best owners act like employees, and the best employees act like owners.
Oh, That's good.
I love that because the best employees act like owners because they're just, even though they don't own the business, they're invested in the business success. They care. And then the best owners don't act like they're on some high platform. They act like employees. It's like we're a team, right? And even though I own the business, these are my team members. I look at them as equals because without them, I have zero success, right? And so we're in the trenches together. And so those people and anybody out there that has owned a business and has had team members, you know what I'm talking about. You know those people. It's just like holy cow, they just care, right? They're looking at every little thing. How can they save some money here, even though it doesn't affect their paycheck? They just care about the success of the business. That's hard.
Yeah, I got one on my team right now. Noman, shout out to him. Man, that guy just crushes. But okay, so how long does it take you to figure that out then, right? Like I'm imagining a doc thinking to themselves like, okay, got it. Like these are the things I'm looking for. Can I do that in an initial interview? Is this just like one conversation? Like when do you pull the trigger on that?
Yeah, so we want to do multiple interviews, obviously. Probably a little more in depth with docs than CAs. So I'll talk about CAs. So we just do a quick, 15-minute, interview online with them first. My office manager will do it, and just to get a feel, is this person even worth pursuing? Right. If they are, then we bring them in the office, and I'll meet with her at that point, and we just ask a bunch of questions. We ask not the basic stuff like what do you do, what'd you do before, where'd you go to school. It's like asking questions to really understand like how much they care. So we have core values in our office. I hope every office does. That really defines what's important. And so we'll ask questions specifically to find out, to kind of pull out, do they share and demonstrate our core values as well? Because they could technically be an A player, but if they don't share our core values, it's not going to work out. Right. And so we want to know, do they share those core values? Do they care? Right. And so we do a longer interview to kind of hopefully bring that out. And then after that, if we like them, then we have them do a working interview where they will hang out for 4 hours for a shift and just hang out and interact with patients, interact with other CAs. So we get to see how do they treat other people? How do they treat the staff? Like, are they, getting involved? Are they asking questions? Like, and so we get a really good feel if they'll be a good fit for the team. Now, there obviously is no perfect way because even top grading says even if you follow their systems, which is the best in the world, you still only have a 75% chance of being an A player. So it's not a perfect system, but we just do our best to increase our odds. And then if we find we have a B or C player, then unfortunately we'll have to part ways.
I know how you get to 100%. What you do is you put a bug on them, like a little hidden microphone. You don't tell them about it, but then you just track them. I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how you get to 100%. You got to know what they're saying behind the scenes. But
yeah,
anyways,
100%.
so let's talk about training for a moment here. So, okay, you got the A player. They fit the team, the vibe, the culture. They have the same values. And now let's talk about training. Like, I know there's a difference between getting somebody hyped up at a
Mhm.
seminar and just being like, "Woo, this is amazing," versus like actually training somebody that understands maybe scorecards or ROI or just like really owning their role.
Yeah.
What's the differences there, and what does that look like?
No, it's great. I think those things where you do get hyped up are great because that solidifies the why. Right? That's the why. It's like, especially in chiropractic, we have just, I mean, it's our mission is amazing, right? It's like we have so much to be passionate about. So I love having conferences where we can just get pumped up, like we're changing people's lives. And that's great because that's the why. But if we don't have systems to back that up, that hype is short lived, right? It's like 3 days later, you're back in the grind. Oh God, I'm dealing with this again. So we have to have systems to actually back that up. And that's where training comes in. And it's important to understand that training, it's a culture. It's really a culture that as a CEO, our job is to establish that culture and then reestablish it over time. See, we like to say that we see patients in between trainings. We don't say that we do trainings in between seeing patients. We see patients between trainings. But the emphasis is on the training because the training is so vital. Because if we don't do the training well, the practice suffers. And so the way we talk about this, because a lot of people don't really understand training, we talk about onboarding as the first 90 days of a new hire. Right? So the first 90 days, you're onboarding somebody. That's multiple hours of training, probably a day. And what onboarding does, it gets them to a level of competency. Right? They can competently execute their position, which is great. But we can't stop there. So ongoing training after that, we do that an hour every week. Even my employees, I have an employee with me for 21 years. Right? We still train an hour every single week. And that develops mastery. So onboarding gives you competency, but then ongoing training gives you mastery. And competent team members are great, but it's the masters that really take your business to the next level. And so that's what training really accomplishes. And so we actually have a training curriculum, we call it, in the Remarkable Practice, and it's laid out. It's 26 weeks of training. And so we basically go through the entire patient journey from the day zero new patient phone call all the way through, visit 3,000 and somebody who's been with you for, 30 years, right? What does that journey look like? We train on every single step of the process. So there's nothing left to chance. And after those 26 weeks, we don't just think, hey, we're done, we're masters. We go right back to the beginning and we start over again. Because we're human beings. Bad habits creep in. We forget things, right? And there's this thing called creep, where it's like slowly but surely after a training, we just kind of creep away. The team members kind of creep away. And it's like, 6 months after we do a training, I could go to the front desk and hear my CA say something. I'm like, what the heck was that? That's not what we do. It's that creep. And that's why it's so important that we're constantly training over and over again. And what's great about training is that not only does it give you that durability, but A players love training. They love it. A players want to be developed over time. And in fact, if you don't develop them, they will leave you. And so once my clients start to implement training protocols, they start to find out very quickly who are A players and who are not. The A players love it. The B and C's complain. They don't really want to do it because A players want to be really good at what they do, and they want to be then left alone. Right? And A players say, tell me what success looks like, doc. Train me up to be a master and then leave me do my thing. Do not micromanage me. That's what A players want. And that's what we want on our team. And so how we define a meeting versus a training, because some people think they're having trainings, but they're really having meetings, is that a training involves role playing. If you did not role play, you had a meeting, you did not have a training. And while meetings are great, training is role playing. We have to get together and work and role play, go through scripts, get feedback, help people improve so they understand exactly what needs to be accomplished each step of the journey. And that's why we train on it. And that's why systems are important, because if you don't have systems, you have nothing to train on. And so systems have to be written down in manuals that the team knows exactly what's expected of them.
This is probably a common analogy, but it's kind of like a sports team, right? I mean, it's like you don't look at somebody that's won the Super Bowl and they're like, all right, I'm good. I don't need to train anymore. It's like, no, we go back to ground zero. We go watch game film. We train again. We do the same things we've always done, because if it worked last time, it's going to work again. And there's actually, and there's a great book by Stephen Pressfield. It's one of my favorite authors. I'm not familiar with him at all, but he wrote a book called Turning Pro. But that's one of the things that he talks about is like, basically, you got to take it seriously.
Being a pro versus being an amateur, right?
100%. Let's talk about the other analogy of what a CEO is. Everyone is familiar with the initial analogy, but let's talk about the chief energy officer. So, okay, we're training our team. We're high energy. We got the culture. We got everything that feels right. But I'm sure at some point there's probably just like an energy drain that's exhausting for a business owner. Like how do you manage your energy? How does the other CEOs manage their energy? Like how do you do this effectively?
No, that's great. And it's managing probably isn't the right word. It's keeping the energy for the team. Because I use that explanation all the time, that CEO's chief energy officer. And sometimes when people hear that, they're like thinking, oh, I got to be the motivational speaker. I got to constantly inspire my team. I got to be the cheerleader with the pom poms. It's like, no, that's not what we mean by energy. This is what it is. Focus is what creates energy. See, I have docs tell me that they want to be busier. Doc, I want to be busier. And I say, no, you don't. You want to be more productive. The difference between busyness and productivity, it's focus. Focus for you and focus for your team. Because people who are focused are energized. And so we actually have an equation that we use in Remarkable Practice. We've adapted it from Einstein's theory of relativity. We've all heard of E equals MC squared, right? That we've all heard that. So we've adapted it to the chiropractic profession. And what that E is energy. M stands for money. That's the compensation. We got to get the compensation right? We always say that you don't get what you want, you get what you incentivize. So we have to have the compensation right for the team members with how they're paid, how they're bonused, because that definitely money incentivizes people without a doubt. But money's expensive. People metabolize money very quickly. So the C squared part is crucial communications. There's 5 crucial communications that you must have with your team in order to keep them energized. Number 1 is vision casting. Vision casting is we have to cast the vision of what does success look like? Where are we going? Why do we exist? Right? Because as human beings, we all have this inherent need to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. We all have it. And like I said earlier, what chiropractic is one of the biggest visions I can think of. The impact we can have for humanity. And so we have to set that vision and enroll our team members in that vision, so they realize their job is bigger than just getting a paycheck. Right? It's impacting lives and impacting our community. So that's vision casting. The second one is expectations and agreements. We have to have clear expectations and honest agreements, because any successful relationship is built off that. whether it's an employee relationship, a relationship with our spouse, with our friends, with our patients. We have to have clear expectations and honest agreements. Like I said earlier, A players want to know exactly what's expected of them. They want to be trained to mastery and they want to be left alone. So we have to set the expectation. Okay, check-in CA, here is your role. Here's what we expect of you. And we're going to make an agreement that you can execute these things. Right. So it's having clear expectations and agreements. When team members have that, they're focused. They know exactly what to focus on. See, a lot of owner operators, the people that own jobs, there's chaos everywhere. There's no predictability. They don't know what the doctor's going to do day to day. It's like, oh, he treats one patient this way. And this, I don't know what to expect. B and C players are fine with chaos because they're just showing up for the paycheck. They don't care. A players will not put up with it. Right? If there's chaos, they're out. They're going somewhere else. So we have to have very clear expectations and agreements. The third crucial communication is training and equipping. We talked about this already. Training and equipping your team is the biggest return on investment you will ever get in your business, bar none. Marketing is a distant second. The amount of money that it takes to train and equip your team effectively is very low based on the ROI that you get from it. And I remember, I think her name was Lori Bozzi. She did this great article years ago. She's a financial writer, and she did a lot of research where she went in and looked at the most successful businesses, and this isn't chiropractic, in the United States, like the S&P 500 top businesses, and they looked at how much they invested in training and equipping their people. And what they found is the people that put the most money into training and equipping their team members, they had a 6.72 to 1 ROI, which means that every dollar they put into training and equipping their team, they got $6.72 back in increased revenue. They had a 300% higher revenue per employee. And I can't remember all the other stats, but it was like mind blowing. People that put time and effort into training and equipping their team. And so most docs don't do that enough, or they just say, hey, just watch me or kind of figure it out. That's obviously not going to lead to success, especially if you want to be able to turn your job into a business. Go ahead.
You're say well, I was just going to say, it reminds me of, thanks for picking up on that. But I think there's a great meme out there that basically says something along the lines of like, what if I spend $10,000 and they leave me? And then they counter that as like, what if you don't spend $10,000 and they stay?
Yep.
It's like, oh, duh, spend the money.
Yeah, spend the money you're going to lose.
Yeah, exactly.
Spend the money you're going to lose, because guess what? If there's something called opportunity cost that most people don't think about, right? Because you're not investing in your people, you didn't grow $300,000 that you could have, right? You just lost $300,000 because you didn't train your team to grow to that level. Spend 100%. The money you're going to lose. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. So the fourth crucial communication is celebration and recognition. This is a huge one, and one I struggled with forever. It's like, I still can't believe I thought this way, but 15, 20 years ago, I used to think like, I can't like give my team too much praise because then they're going to ask me for a raise. They're going to they're going to think they're so good, or they may leave, right? But what's short-sighted thinking, right? It's like people have this inherent need to be recognized, right? Everybody in our lives, every day of our lives, they're walking around with this sign around their neck that says, make me feel important. Make me feel important. And if you can do that, they will never leave you. That goes for your loved ones. That goes for your team members. That goes for your patients. So how can we make our people feel important? Right. That's what celebration and recognition is all about. It's kind of a two-part, because the celebration is, and CEOs out there, you're gonna resonate with this. It's like, hey, we set these big quarterly goals. Awesome, we hit the goals. Great, good job, guys. Okay, our goals for next quarter are this. And you're just like, and the team's like, dude, we just busted our butt for 3 months. You celebrate for 5 seconds. Like, can we have a party, or can we recognize this? But that's how we're wired as CEOs. So we have to realize that we're not normal. And that was something we talked about the weirdo thing before, is that I don't need recognition. I'm my own harshest critic. So when people give me compliments, yeah, it's okay, but it doesn't mean a lot to me. And so I assumed everybody's that way. But I realized, no, I'm the weirdo. Like most people, they need recognition. It's like a drug that they need. And most CEOs don't give it properly. But what's great about recognition, it's free. And they found that recognition is more powerful. It triggers more dopamine release than sex and drugs. That's how powerful recognition is. And yet most people don't do it. So what I've had to do, because I'm not naturally good at that, is I built systems that into my everyday and every monthly and quarterly routines where I am giving people recognition. It's in our monthly meetups, it's in our quarterly reviews. It's like even in our weekly team meetings, I always find somebody to recognize. And what that does is, first of all, it gives recognition, which is powerful for our team members, but it forces me to actually go look to see what they're doing well. And when you start to look to see what your team members are doing well, you start to see a lot of things that they're really awesome at, right? But if you're not looking, then you just don't notice those things. So celebration recognition is such an important part. And again, it's free, guys. Take the time to do it. And the fifth and final crucial communication is guardrails and discipline. We have to have guardrails in place of what's acceptable. Because if we don't have those, or if we put up with people who are breaking those, you lose the entire respect of your entire team. They think, oh, well, she can get away with that, so why should I bother following those rules? Right. And when there's people on the team that need to be let go, it's hard sometimes, CEOs, I get it, but you have to let them go. And what you usually will find out is when you let that person go, that person who should not be on the team, the rest of the team's like, dude, what took you so long? It's like, why didn't you tell me? It's like, you're the boss. It's not my job. Right. And so I've heard it said that the most expensive part of a CEO's life is the time between when they know somebody's wrong for the team and the time they actually do something about it. We always say hire slow, fire fast. It's not always easy. It's easier said than done, but it's something you have to do, and your team will respect you for it because they realize, hey, he put these guardrails and discipline in place and he's executing on it. If this person's not doing what they need to do, he's executing. He's staying in the line. Really, really important. So those are the 5 things that we need to do. If we can do that and get the compensation right, that's what energizes people because they're focused.
2 things I wanted to touch on there. One of them is the firing thing. If I had to guess, I'm sure a big part of that is it's probably the biggest emotional challenge, mostly because it probably feels like, if you look back at our old tribal days, is that like if you kick somebody out of the tribe, you're essentially like punishing them to death. And it's probably what it feels like emotionally. And then the other thing that I wanted to touch on was I think how I think surprisingly similar we're hardwired. You mentioned the praise thing, the praise and recognition. I'm very similar to you. Is that my favorite people are people that tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear, which basically means like tell me the facts, because that actually helps me learn and grow. And I'm very future oriented. I was like, got it, moving forward. And so I've also had to train myself habitually to just like always point out when I notice stuff. And the thing that most clicked for me was when I learned from BJ Fogg. He wrote a book called Tiny Habits, I think it was. And he said, there's a quote in there that I think will forever live in my brain. And he said, we change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad. In other words, positive reinforcement is the best way to get behavior change, as opposed to negative reinforcement. And so like ever since that's clicked for me, I'm always like rewarding good behaviors, praising, recognizing, if somebody accomplishes something, like I try, and like not naturally, I don't naturally want to do those things, but it is a learned behavior for me. But it's
And
funny.
it's so simple if you think about it, because put yourself in one of your team members' shoes. It's like, if I bust my butt and Dr. Eric never recognizes me, why even try? It's just disempowered. If I know I'm never going to get recognized, but if I know that if I do something well and he recognizes me, it's like a drug. They want more of it. So they want to do more things because they want to get that recognition. Now, being recognized by a superior is one of the most powerful things a person can feel. And our job is
100%.
to provide that.
100%. You touched on it very slightly. You mentioned the ROI on marketing versus training. Let's tap on marketing for a second here. So how does I know you're a big believer in brand. I know a big part of this too is like trying to become a local celebrity within your area. I'm curious then, is like, what is both the, I guess, in-person and online strategies that you would take to accomplishing this like local celebrity thing that we talk about?
Yeah, that's huge. Well, first off, we have to get clear on what brand is. Because, see, a lot of docs think that brand is what they say about themselves to our community. That's not what brand is. Brand is what your community says about you. Big distinction, right? We can put things out all we want, but if our community is seen or saying something different, that's what our brand is. It's what they're saying, not what we're saying. So it's important to get clear on that. So how do you build that brand that you want? You got to get yourself into the community, physically and digitally. You just got to get known. Right? Dr. Franson, who's the founder of the Marco practice, been my mentor for many years. He said something to me a decade ago that's just stuck with me. He said, Eric, he said, all the people who are not in your practice are not in your practice. You got to get out to get known. You got to get out to get known. You can't just sit in your practices praying for new patients. You got to get out and meet people, make sure that they understand you. So fortunately for years, I would get out, we would do lunch and learns and chamber events, and we do all these things just to get known. We did marketing, advertising, so the physical is getting out and then meeting people. Go out and do talks, go out and join your chamber, like just meet other people in the community so they understand who you are and what you're about. And then obviously with the digital world now has evolved so much over the last 20 years, get your team on social media, like get known by your community. You can even pay for it if you want and get, meta ads. whatever it takes to get your message out there so that people can see it and they will develop what they believe your brand to be. And when you do that, you start to get a lot of, you get known, you become that local celebrity, but also you get a lot of Google reviews, which is super powerful, right? I always help my docs, like, how can we get more Google reviews? I'm more on the East Coast, but on the West Coast, it might be Yelp, whatever it is that's huge. It's because that's what people look at. We probably get 5 to 10 new patients a month just because they say, oh, I chose you because you had the most Google reviews. It's like the simplest thing. And we've worked hard at that. I think we're close to 800 Google reviews now. And we're by far the most in our area. So it's like, it's an easy sales tactic. Imagine how much I would have to spend on advertising to get those same 5 to 10 new patients. And here it's for free just because we developed that brand in our community.
I love free ads. As much as we can do that, the better. And the Google, that's something that we do a lot with my agency is like the Google business profile side of things is like you said, just showing up in the top spot for that is like zero ad spend, lots of new patients. You're always in the top spot. You're easily recognizable. It builds your brand. It builds trust. It's just like it's a no brainer for a practice, honestly.
It's huge.
That's fine. Let's land this plane. So I know one of the biggest misconceptions you see is that more money requires more time. In other words, like if I'm trying to build this practice to 1, 2, 3, $10 million, whatever your number is, that means I'm gonna have to spend 40, 50, 60, 100 hours a week to do this. But you seem to have done otherwise. You're able to make more by working less. So if you were to go back to your younger self, give yourself advice. Maybe you were at that time grinding 60 hours a week, because I know you probably were at that point. What is the advice that you would give to yourself or anybody else in that circumstance?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so I actually saw it online a few months ago, and I've seen it. It's become kind of a buzzword or buzz phrase. Is that time is the new flex? It's not money; it's time. Because we can always make more money. You can't make more time, right? You look at somebody like Elon Musk. I don't know what he's worth now, 200, $300 billion. Guess it depends on Tesla's stock price, but Elon Musk has the same 168 hours a week that you and I have. What makes him him? He just utilizes his time much better. It's just that simple. And so one thing that had a huge impact on me years ago, I read a story about a guy named Ken Fisher. He's one of the founder of Fisher Investments, and it's like one of the brokerage or whatever big financial firms. He manages like whatever it is, like $300 billion or whatever he manages. But they did an interview with him, and he basically said he started out 40 years ago, whenever it was, and he was the only team member. Right, he had his little, tiny office. He was the one answering phones. He was the one doing the sales. He was cleaning the toilets. Like he just did everything. And they asked him, like, how did you get to where you are today? He said, I got really good at quitting. And like, what do you mean you got good at quitting? He said, once I drove enough revenue, I quit answering phones. I hired a receptionist. And then I quit cleaning toilets. I hired a cleaner. I quit doing this, quit doing that, till eventually he's obviously built it to thousands of employees over time. Because kind of like we talked about earlier, he realized what he's good at. And as he drove more revenue, he could buy his time back. And so he could focus on the most important things that he should actually do. And this is something I really focus with clients on because, sometimes I'll have my CEO clients that are, 7-figure businesses and they're still doing like tasks that a CA could do. And I'm like, you could pay a CA $20 an hour to do that task. So if you're doing it, you're paying yourself $20 an hour. That's what you're doing. Is your time worth more than $20 an hour? Obviously. And so we get really understanding what are the most high impact activities that you can do to drive your business and delegate everything else that you can possibly do because you are wasting your time. I guarantee you, Elon Musk is not signing paychecks. He's not answering phones, right? He is doing the most visionary high level stuff possible. And he hires everybody else to do all the other things. That's what makes him so special. And so we have to get clear, especially CEOs, on what are those things you need to do and then start to delegate the rest. Now, obviously, if I'm only bringing in 300 grand a year, I can't hire 3 doctors, right? I can't. So you have to slowly drive more revenue. And as you drive more revenue, now you can start to buy your time back, right? You grow, you can maybe hit capacity blocks, you add another doctor, add another CA, add an office manager, whatever that is. And I love what Dan Martell says about this. Dan Martell wrote a great book called Buy Back Your Time. I recommend every entrepreneur read it. I don't know if you read it or not, Corey.
I have changed my life.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. But he talks something about the buyback rate. And what he says in there is you should be able to get a 4 times ROI on any of your team members. So if you're not sure when to hire somebody, you simply say, what is my time worth? Just take all your revenue and all the benefits you get from owning your business, divide it by 2,000 hours. Right? There's about 2,000 hours in a year if you work 40 hours a week. So let's say I get $200,000 of benefit for my business through what I get paid, write-offs, like all that stuff. I get 200,000 divided by 2,000 hours. That's $100 an hour. So my time is worth $100 an hour. So if I want to hire, let's say, an associate doctor, I have to say, okay, what's one fourth of $100 an hour? That's $25 an hour. I don't know any associates that can hire for $25 an hour, at least not any good ones. So guess what? I'm not ready to hire an associate yet. I have to find ways to drive more revenue until I get to that point where I'm four times. Now it's time to hire that person. But at $100 an hour, I could probably hire a CA because I could pay a CA $25 an hour or less. Okay, good. Now I can get all those clerical stuff that's taking up half of my day off of my plate, let the CA do it, pay them way less than my time is worth. And now I can focus more on building the business. And eventually I might get to 300K or 400K. Okay, now I can afford to hire an associate. And you keep hiring from there. And so when docs ask me, Doc, I think it's time to hire an associate, we have that conversation. Okay, how much are you bringing in? Because most associates, you're going to have to pay them around 100K. Right. And so it's like, well, guess what? If you're only making 200K, that means you're going to give him or her 100K. That means you only get to keep 100K for yourself. Right. That's probably not going to work for most doctors. Right. And so it's like, how does that work? And what we also do, and I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but we get clear on what should you delegate. So I have my clients go through and for a week, I want them to write down everything that they did in that week. Every single thing they did. I sent emails, I did payroll, I filled out these forms, like whatever they did an entire week. And I want them to go through and I want to highlight the task green or red. Green means I actually really enjoy doing this, or red is like, oh, I hate doing this. I just thought I had to do it. And then also the next step is put dollar signs next to it. It's kind of like, if you look up a restaurant on Google, it's like, the McDonald's is like $1 sign, and then you have like the high end steakhouses like $4 signs, right? So we do the same thing for these tasks. How much revenue do these tasks actually drive from one to $4 signs? And then at the end, you look and say, okay, only the things in green that are $3 or $4 signs, those are the things I should be doing, and I'm going to maintain those. Everything else, I'm going to delegate those. I may not be able to delegate them yet, but at least I know what I have to delegate. I figure out, maybe I have a team member now I can start to delegate those things to, or my next hire is going to be the person I can delegate XYZ to. And I can start making a plan to get these off my plate so I can start to buy back my time and drive more revenue and have more impact. But what happens is I did this for a decade. I just assumed as an entrepreneur, there's things I'm going to love to do and things I hate to do. And I'm just going to have to do it. That's just a part of it. And I literally just did the same stuff for a decade. And it just kept me kind of stuck. Once I understood this and was able to apply it and hire great team members that were better at a lot of the things than I do. Right? That's what's awesome. If you do this right, you can find team members that are better at things than you are. I have a marketing manager. She's better at marketing than I am. A lot of my docs are better at delivering care than I am. My check-in CA is way better at being a check-in CA than I am. If you're the best person in your business, you don't own a business, you own a job. So we got to make sure we hire team members that are professionals in what they do. And by identifying that buyback rate, it really helps you know when to hire, and then also what to hire for based on delineating those tasks, what you love to do, what you don't love to do, and how much value those things actually drive.
Yeah, I remember when that book fell into my lap, I was so stressed out in my business and my fiance could see it. And it was because exactly what you were saying is that there were just so many of these little things that I was doing that were probably such minor, low leverage tasks that I should have never been doing from the get go. And I think I'm going to butcher this, but it's something along the lines of like, you can't build $1 million business on $10 tasks,
Yeah, that's
essentially.
it.
And
That's it. Quote. Yep.
that's what I was doing. And
Mhm.
it was a nightmare. I can safely say, Eric, you are my favorite weirdo that I've ever brought onto this podcast show. So, what's your plug? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can find us. Go to the remarkablepractice.com. You'll find us there. I'm not as active on social media as I probably should. I'm 50 and I might let my kids do that. But you can find me on Instagram at Eric DiMartino1. Find me on Facebook, just Eric DiMartino. Yeah, find me in those locations. And my email address is Dr. Eric. It's DRERIC at theremarkablepractice.com. Please feel free to email me. I'd love to answer any questions you guys have and help in any way I can.
And will you be in Phoenix in March?
I will.
Okay, cool.
100%. Yeah, we're having our business immersion, the TRP business immersion, first weekend in March in Phoenix. And if any of our listeners want to attend, reach out and we can probably get you um, a discounted admission to come check us out as a guest. And we'd love to have you.
Sweet. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for doing this.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me.